Hi, everyone, and welcome to PyData Global. We're excited to have you join us. Please feel free to use the chat to connect with fellow attendees and share your thoughts during the session. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A tab. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to our presenters, Jeremy and Abby. So Jeremy is the founder of Datacove with 20 years experience in data analytics and insight professional analytics. And we have Abby, who is the data scientist at Datacove and also the co-organizer of Earl Conference. So welcome to the stage, Abby and Jeremy, and take it over.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about customizing your dashboard design. And before anyone says, I know we've kind of infiltrated this conference because it's Python, we're in R, not apologizing. So let's get into it. What are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk a little bit about the project aims. Obviously, we've done this wonderful project with the local government, but I feel like we need to give a little bit of context about it first. We're then going to move on to talk about why Shiny, why did we choose that application in the first place? Then we'll talk a little bit about customization. So how we use JavaScript and CSS to make it not really look like a Shiny app. We're going to talk a little bit about accessibility as well, and then we'll demonstrate our case study too. So firstly, I'd like to just quickly introduce Datacove. If you've not heard of us before, then Datacove are an analytics partner. We are R, Python, and Shiny experts, and we work across three main cores. That is customer analytics, so unearthing your most valuable customers and where to find more of them. Marketing analytics, so seeing where you're investing in the best and making use of your budget. And process automation. Every single company and person does something that honestly, they'd probably rather not do and would rather spend their time elsewhere that's more impactful for their business. So we will take that away for you forever. But we don't just do that, we do other things too. So for example, we obviously do Shiny dashboards, but we also work in other applications too and streamline reporting. We do training across R, Python, Shiny, and also general data science things too. And we're also massive on community. So we have meetups in 6 different cities, which are Manchester, Bristol, Brighton, Portsmouth, and London. And we also do the Earl Conference too in Brighton every year, which is one of Europe's largest R and Python conferences that we're very proud to host. So let's move on a little bit about the project aims. So the project was based on 4 main departments, Health and Wellbeing obviously being the main center of that, and then nature and sustainability, which contributes obviously to your health and well-being. Things obviously like anxiety for health and well-being. Nature looked at things like the bat population, the bee population, and sustainability was about obviously your infrastructure and how green it was. But obviously the main idea here is just building great places for people to live, and this is where the 4 departments come in. So we were part of a 5-year roadmap, still are. So we're currently on that little pink box there, as you can see. We delivered the alpha product, so the first part of the dashboard in 2023. And then this year and around summer, we delivered the beta dashboard, so the second iteration of that. And then next year, we'll be on to the 3rd phase, which will be the next dashboard. But obviously, this did not exist in a vacuum. So we have to be very grateful to all of our partners who also make it possible. So we had Natural England as the lead partner. And then we had loads of different councils, as you can obviously see on there, who contributed to testing the dashboard for us and made sure that our product was best as possible. And it's hosted on local partnerships as well, which gives us the platform for the product. So why did we actually do this? What existed before our wonderful dashboard actually came along? Well, we had 2 issues, and they were on opposite sides of the spectrum. So we had massive lists of relevant data, but we had absolutely no kind of logic to it whatsoever for normal people to access. we had multiple sources buried deep in pages, and it was really hard to understand what you should be using when you wanted to report on a certain department. And then on the other side of that, we had a simplification of actually quite a complex data set. It's all great to say, okay, well, my local authority's well-being is 5. But what does that really mean? Is that 5 out of 5? Is that 5 out of 10? And what does that mean compared to the nation or compared to your local authority next door? It's not actually very helpful to understand. So we needed to find something that was a good in between, something that had good context, but it was still intuitive, it was straightforward, and it wasn't confusing at all. So that brings us a little bit on to where we are right now. So along with our app, which is on the top left called Explore, we also have 2 other parts. So we've got a factor map, which is on your top right, which shows how components and data sets are connected. So for example, like anxiety and happiness would be well connected. And then at the bottom, we've also got a horizon scanning map, which helps you to understand the future of the department based on government drivers and planning. So moving on, let's talk a little bit why we chose Shiny.
Excellent. Now, apologies if you've seen a couple of the slides advanced automatically. This is a kind of hangover from a previous presentation that we gave. So some of the slides are on 20-second advancement, but we'll try and see if we can take that off for the remainder of the slides. Anyway, why did we choose Shiny? I think there's a lot of reasons that we chose Shiny for a project like this. It's a government project, and Shiny's got a lot of well-developed API connectors. We were connecting to ONS data, the Environment Agency data, and there's well-developed APIs, but API connectors that work in R. The great thing about Shiny as well was we wanted a lot of flexibility within the product. We wanted to be able to place things where we wanted them and make them look a certain way so that users could digest the information more easily. If we chose other tools, it was going to be harder to place things exactly where we wanted them and round the corners of the boxes and make things look exactly the way that our stylists wanted them to look. Shiny is also really cost effective. So if you're building a tool, quite a lot of particularly front-end visual tools, the cost can mount up as more and more people use them. Shiny, there is one fee, it's one license, no matter how many people use it, and it's one fee to host that application on the Shiny server, and that fee is never more than $350 a month. If you think about other tools that could be thousands a month, thousands a year per user, that can mount up very, very quickly. And the other big reason was community. We're building a government product. R and Shiny are used heavily within the government in the UK. So not only are we building something that we can understand and that we can use, but other users within the government community can digest, use, and consume the application, but also add to it as well. So we've got more people than just us as developers that can really maintain this product. I'll talk a little bit about the design and build. I'm going to show you a demo later on, not a live demo, I'm not that brave, but I'll show you a pre-recorded video. We'll go through an example. But this is the overall design and build of the application. So Abby mentioned earlier, we've got health, wellbeing, nature, and sustainability. Here is an example of the wellbeing application that we've built. And you can see we've got a bar at the top that tells us what we're looking at. We've got a selector here, so this tells us what local authority we're looking at in England. And then you can see we've got a sidebar and a main layout. And I'll talk about what sidebars and main bars mean in R later on. But here, the sidebar, this allows us to view more information on the data source that we're looking at. We got some charts, and I'll talk about chart selection. Why did we choose charts? We've got some top indicators. So you've got 2 indicators here in the light and the dark blue. So this is kind of telling us where we are. And then we've got a few buttons as well. And I'll talk about how we designed each of these elements and kind of why they're important, but also how you can make a Shiny app not look like an actual Shiny app. I think if you built a Shiny app in R before, you've probably got, or if you've built or seen a Shiny app in R before, there's probably a certain image in your head of the boilerplate. And we wanted to move away from that to create something that's truly unique and different. And there's lots of different ways that we can do that. So I'm just going to move on and talk about some of the customization elements. And the first thing I'm going to do is talk about charts. So you'll see this chart will constantly be kind of changing. This is a visual, but this just shows you the cleanness of the rendering of the charts within the app. Now, I'm not going to sit here and basically say ggplot2 is the worst thing in the world. ggplot2 is brilliant. ggplot2 has got me through many presentations, many applications, many projects within Arbor. But ggplot2 is static. So if you're building a visual, users can see what's happening, they can see a chart, but they can't engage and interact with that chart. The chart's not rendering in this way, as you see each point, each year that we're looking at within the data. Each year kind of pop up as the chart builds within the application. You can't hover over a ggplot2 and look at a tooltip and say, this data point is 7.4, this one's 7.3. So it's very, very limited levels of interactivity for the user. Whereas HighCharter, it's a very odd name for a package because it's HighChart. I don't know why it's got ER at the end and not HighCharter, but I didn't design it, not my package, but it allows for interactivity of charts. It's really good for web applications. It's really good for interactive reports. So if you're doing things like Markdown that you want users to interact with as well, HighCharts is a really good alternative to ggplot. And it allows you to drill into individual points. You can select and deselect points as well. But also, if you've used ggplot2 before, it's actually not difficult to write a HighCharts chart code. On the right-hand side here, these are completely different charts that we have built over time. It's not the same chart. But with ggplot, you can see you use the plus notation. So we start with a blank page. We say, what plot do we want? And then we put some axes onto it. Then we design the theme. Then we put some text onto it. And then we put some labels onto it. And HighCharts is very similar. It's just using the pipe instead of the plus notation. We start with a blank piece of paper. We specify what chart we want. So you can see the second line, 823, is telling us we want a line chart. We specify a title, and then we specify the individual chart elements. So the one thing that I would recommend if you're building interactive apps is have a look at HighCharts because it gives you a lot more flexibility than ggplot2. The next item I want to talk about is just delving a bit more into the world of JavaScript and CSS. We created elements called classes and identifiers, which are important element types within Shiny. So just as an example, this red bar at the top, this is what we've called a top bar. So when you're building a Shiny application, you can use custom CSS to give things what we call a class. A class is something you can then refer to within elements of your Shiny code. As you can see from my code in the bottom left-hand corner here, I've created a fluid row in Shiny, which is the notation that we use to create rows and columns. And I've called it a top bar, which means straight away it takes on all of these CSS elements that I've coded into my app. So I've got a background color of this red that you can see. I've got white inside the app. I've got some padding so that not everything is right to the far left-hand side here. And you can start to really customize every individual element. The reason that you do this globally is once you've written it once, this class can then be used everywhere you want a top bar. And you can also give things an identifier. So rather than just a class, you can say this element here is called the top bar for well-being, if you wanted to as well. Once you've written that element of customization once, you can then apply it to other areas within the Shiny application. As a second example, up, I'm just going to look at the top insight rows. So these are the light blue box on the left-hand side and the dark blue box on the right-hand side. So we've called these our top insight rows. We wanted to round the corners of them. So you can see we've got some code here that rounds the corners with the radius border. We wanted to have a slightly different margin on the right-hand side that didn't cut off when we make the app bigger or smaller. So we've created, again, a class for our top insight rows, and then within those classes, we can customize them further. I've had to here set the colors within the element rather than within the class CSS because each box has a different color. But using CSS and JavaScript, it takes it away from kind of the really standard boilerplate Shiny apps that you might have seen before or that you're used to, and it starts to add your own kind of level of customization, but also you can put your brand stamp on it as well. And I think that's really important. If you're building an application, you want it to feel like it's your application and your brand. Also creating some kind of universal font scheme and color scheme. So you can see the color scheme that we've got for our wellbeing app, which is the one that we're showcasing now, is on the right-hand side here. So we developed the color scheme so that we knew certain colors would be used on the app, and then we put those colors around each of the individual boxes that you can see. And I think that's important to make sure that every time, you can see here, we've got 4 buttons at the top of the app. So these are 4 different wellbeing sources. If I was to move off the anxiety source and move into the happiness source, I want to see that the same color scheme has preserved on that second button and on the third button, so that there's some kind of consistent feel for the user from one to the other. The other tip that I would recommend is each of these has a chart. So you can see we've got the anxiety chart here. We have a chart on happiness. We have a high chart on life satisfaction as well. And within those charts, we're going to have lines and colors and labels. Making sure they're consistent from one chart to the other is so much easier if you set up a style as a global variable at the top of the application. So for example, these are the fonts that we set up for the labels. These are the fonts that we set up for the axis. And that means you're not going and customizing every individual chart. If you've got 4 in this case or more, you might have 10, 15, 20 charts within a Shiny app. All of them follow the same type of label fonts, axis fonts, colors. Everything looks consistent from one chart to the next. You can also do things like add logos and branded fonts. So I'll talk very briefly about logos. When you're building a Shiny application, and this is within R, I'm not going to sit here and sadly help people with Shiny applications in Python, but I'm sure I possibly could with some of my R experience. Here's an example of what your folder might look like. So you have a folder where you build your Shiny app. You might have some static data that lives in a spreadsheet. So those spreadsheets are in the folder. You've got your RS Connect, which is how you deploy it to your Shiny server. But you might want to put a logo on. So, going back a couple of slides, as you can see here on the Wellbeing app, I've got a logo in the top left-hand corner. That logo lives within this folder here, which is called www. So this is where you put images, branding, logos. You can put that in and you can call that into your Shiny application. Fonts are also a really good way of customizing an app. Now, if you've used R before, you'll know that within base R, there are very, very few fonts installed. So hence why this whole boilerplate aspect of a Shiny app. Shiny apps look very familiar because they probably only got about 2 or 3 different fonts in there. But actually, you can use your own fonts. So you can pull fonts from online, as you can see we've done here. We used a specific font that was requested for this application. You can also use the extra font package if you're our users. Extra font loads basically most of the common fonts that you might get within, I'm not going to advertise Microsoft, but most of your lovely Microsoft applications. So you can use extra font, call those into R, and customize your application a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit about accessibility. Accessibility is important. So what do I mean by accessibility? We want this app to be easily used and consumed by anybody. And what do I mean by anybody? Well, I'll come into accessibility a bit more. I might start on the right-hand side here. So visual impairments. We've got applications with charts, with lines that wave, with lots of different text on them. A really important aspect of this project was to be able to design an app that anybody could use. So even if you're visually impaired, you'd still be able to consume elements within that chart. We had, for me, an incredibly fascinating accessibility audit conducted on the dashboard. And it allowed us to change a few elements, but also to learn further for some of our future Shiny apps. Within high charts, you can put a tag at the back end of each chart that you display in an interactive environment that has a bit of text. And that text, if you've got a screen reader installed for somebody that is visually impaired, that text will call out as the chart renders. So it might say, this is a line chart showing the anxiety levels over time. And you can tag every single chart so that people that are a little bit more visually impaired can still consume the information that's being shown in front of them. The other important things, very simple for screen readers, just telling it what language you're operating in. So a very simple line at the top of your code saying we're operating in English, so EN, and then you know that that application, when a screen reader touches it, it's going to make sure that it's reading things out in English for those that need to consume it in different ways. Making sure that your tags, the HTML tags, ARIA attributes, again, checking at the back end that you have switched things on or off so that anybody that's trying to consume information, charts as they render, text that displays on the app is read back to them in a digestible and easy to understand way. But it goes a lot more than just let's build an application, let's put some nice colors onto it. When you're thinking about colors within a Shiny app, you've got to think about the contrast. So we were very careful with the colors that we picked here. We've got some red backgrounds. We don't want to have sort of purple text on a red background. And we managed to change quite a few of the color palettes as a result of accessibility as well. So the accessibility audit was an important step to just make sure that not just we built an app that can be useful in terms of information, but that it can be consumed by everybody as well. So I'm just going to move on to a quick demonstration. So as I said, it's not a live demo, and I'm very much hoping that the video automatically plays. Yep, it's automatically playing. It's great. So this is just an example of the Wellbeing app. Now, what we've got here on the top right-hand side, you can see we've got select a local authority. So I'm going to choose, as an example, Datacove are a Brighton-based data consultancy. So we're going to choose Brighton and Hove. At some point, you see, this is the thing, when you pre-record it, you're waiting for the video. There you go, there's Brighton and Hove, we're all ready. And we can see that on the anxiety tab, which is highlighted in blue here to show that we're on the blue tab, the anxiety tab at the moment, we can see Brighton's anxiety levels. We're actually quite anxious people in Brighton. High scores for anxiety is not good. Whereas the national average, which is the darker blue line, is a little bit lower than where we are in Brighton. And you can hover over and see the tooltips for each of those particular years and scores. You can view the full data, as you can see where the hand is. There's a cursor to view the full data source and also get more information. There's external links, and you can just code these up as HTML within the app. We've got our top insights indicators. These are just telling us the most recent scores that we've got for Brighton, which is 3.3, 3.2 nationally. And then we can tab onto the other tabs. So happiness is now blue, as you can see. We can consume the charts in the same way. Now, another great feature of high charts is you can take series off. So by deselecting or selecting national here, we can just look at the score for our local area. And you can't do that with ggplot2 because of no interactivity. And the other tabs work in very similar ways as well. And you can then go back to your selector and you could change if you wanted to look at another local authority. So again, behind these buttons, you can see that anxiety, happiness, life satisfaction, worthwhile. There's a lot of code that sits behind there that says, turn this button blue when I click on it and turn the other buttons gray. That's an important part of user experience and accessibility as well. The user wants to know what button or what part of the application they're on. If they're all gray, then I don't really know where I am apart from the title of the graph. But having things show up in different colors is really, really useful. For those of you that love art as much as you can probably gather we do and want to go and build Shiny apps yourself, here are some recommended packages that we've used for this application. So I'll leave this on the screen for a moment if you want to take some screenshots, but I've split them out into 3 different areas. So you've got data integration. This is bringing all of the data into our Shiny app. So we've used API connectors, so ONS particularly, but HTTR and JSON Lite are great packages for using if you want to bring API data into R. Data cleaning, so we've obviously been working with geocoded data, it's government data, we're looking at local areas, so geocoder, but also tidyverse is naturally very useful across all applications within R. And then high charts and R charts for visualization as well, but also to get that JavaScript element, you want Shiny.js and a bit of extra font to make sure your fonts look slick too. I will leave it there, just a very, very quick couple of slides to end with. As was mentioned at the start, we are a data and analytics consultancy. We also organise the EARL conference. So EARL is the Enterprise Applications of the R Language Conference. I'm preaching to a Python community here, and we have introduced Python into EARL as of this year. So this is people showcasing commercial applications, things that they have built that have done good for people, for businesses, done good for the world, for society within R and Python. The conference takes place in Brighton on the 14th to the 16th of October next year. But as your wonderful people that have joined us today at PyData Global, we are extending our super early bird offer to you. So if you book your pass between now and the 31st of December using the wonderful QR code on the bottom right of this slide, you'll get 20% off your passes. That's the best deal that you will get. So you've got a few weeks. Please scan the QR code. Please come and join us in the UK. But because we love you guys so much, we're inviting you to come for free as well. If you would like to speak or host a workshop at Earl 2025, this is the QR code you want to scan. Speaker applications are open until the end of February next year, so 28th of February 2025. All speakers will receive a free ticket to the day of their talk and a free ticket to the evening event, which I promise you is not something to be missed at an iconic venue in Brighton. I shall leave it there for now, but we are happy. I think we've got a few minutes left. Take a couple of questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeremy and Abby. As they mentioned, we do have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions, we have the Q&A feature tab on the right-hand side. So feel free to use that. We'll wait a couple of minutes here to see if there are any last-minute questions.
That's great. If there are any questions, because we can't see the Q&A tab, just let us know and we will happily answer them.
Absolutely. I'll keep monitoring it. Okay, I think we're all set. So I'll go ahead and wrap up the session. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Jeremy and Abby, for this wonderful presentation. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to scan the QR code on the screen as they mentioned, or head over to our Discord where the link is available in the reception area. A recording of the session will be available immediately after for rewatching. And for those interested in more casual conversations, the lounge is open in the reception for those small group discussions. Again, thank you all for attending this session, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.